Answer.
Partly cloudy and 63. Your next news update, 8:30. Chicago's Morning Answer continues next on AM 560. The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Why the August jobs report matters more than most. That was the headline in the Journal yesterday. A larger cut looms if hiring is soft or the unemployment rate jumps as in July. Well, we've got the August numbers now, 142,000 jobs. That's under expectations. And so hiring is soft. And so maybe a half a point reduction coming at the Fed September 17th and 18th meeting. Wouldn't that be exciting? Interesting, though, sort of counterintuitive. James Freeman writing in the Journal, America still has a worker shortage. The latest NFIB, National Federation of Independent Business, NFIB survey of small business owners, 66% of small transportation firms had job openings in August. Freeman writes, believe it or not, the labor shortage may be getting worse. Job growth is anemic on Main Street, but it's not because owners of small firms aren't still trying to hire. NFIB's chief economist, Bill Dunkelberg, reports that 40% of all owners reported job openings they could not fill in the current period, which is up a skosh from July. 36% of small business owners have openings for skilled workers. That's up. 15% have openings for unskilled. That's down one. Job openings highest in the transportation, construction, and manufacturing sectors, and lowest in the ag and finance sectors. How to make sense of all this and inform the investment decisions or spending decisions you make. To help us with that, please be joined by Jim Perry, founder and CIO of Perry International Capital Partners. James, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. Good morning. And Amy, good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
So, job creation under expectation, but worker shortage that James Freeman is talking about, and then against the backdrop of the Fed meeting and the much anticipated rate cuts. So, distill that for us.
Well, I'll try. It's a murky picture, right?
Yeah.
The biggest problem with the non-farm payroll number is that the Bureau of Labor Statistics takes a snapshot at a time when it's murky weather outside anyway. So it's not a good number to begin with, but it's the best we have, so we have to live with it.
Well, especially after that million job correction.
Well,
yeah, I mean, it's hard to put too much stock in this, right?
Exactly. And, it's another sort of 87,000 again this month, looking at the data this morning. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of revisions downward, and revisions tend to accelerate as the economy is slowing because they're kind of moving averages. So we are having a slowdown. There's no doubt about that. The Fed on the 18th will cut interest rates. I'm not sure how much that's going to help small businesses and households, but it'll help the financial industry and Wall Street and government. So you're going to get a cut. They've got the excuse that they need to do it. And to James Freeman's point, and I haven't seen that article yet. I was traveling yesterday. But there is a labor shortage in the U.S. economy, and there is a housing shortage in the U.S. economy. And the reason that the cost of services for the average household and small businesses is going up is because those labor shortages and housing shortages are increasing prices. And if you put that on top of regulations and the higher cost of food and energy, you've got profit margin squeezes at all small businesses and at every household. So we've got a slow economy that's really not very productive. And the trouble is that the government is competing for resources, especially labor. So the prices of labor are going up. And that, of course, translates into higher service costs for everyone.
So, I mean, does it matter significantly if the Fed's rate cut is a quarter point or a half point?
I don't think so. I went out to dinner last night with a friend of mine who owns a small Italian restaurant here, and I said, what am I going to talk about with Dan tomorrow? What's the biggest thing that you want me to talk about? And he said, what? No kidding. And he said, my costs aren't going down. I said, will it matter if the Fed cuts rates to you? And he says, no, because the prime rate is 8.5%. He can't get a loan for anything below 9% right now. And most small businesses can't, right? And even if the Fed goes to 5% here, with the slowing economy and, a changing of government, the fact is that bankers, because they are risk averse, are they going to reduce their small business loans from, 9.75% to 9% for a guy that wants to expand his restaurant or get a new fleet of trucks? The answer is no, right? The economy is slowing down. So the credit spread between the yields to real money, to real businesses in this country, they're not going to go down that much.
You mentioned the housing issue, too, in terms of cost. Kamala Harris, she's running for president. She has proposed basically a federal rent control scheme. Gee, if only this had been tried somewhere we knew could figure out how it might work out. Oh, wait, it has. And I'm not talking about New York, although that's a good example, New York City. I'm talking about the Netherlands. In July, the Dutch government expanded nationwide rent controls, which had already covered about 80% of rental units, to almost 96% of Dutch rental housing. And you'll be
it goes back down to the very, very tenets of free market capitalism versus government control of economies. Government never makes the right decisions. And the fact is, if government tries to control prices, they go up in everything. It's not just housing, it's food and energy as well. So I think that this new administration under the Harris sort of proposal, if you really look at it, it's not about jobs per se or prices per se. It's really about the cost of getting a new job. If you're a businessman and hiring a new person, and the fact is that the employment situation is getting worse right now and has been getting worse for 3 years and really more like 30 because of the cost of businesses trying to operate profitably. And this is a control of government on all kinds of regulations. And the fact is that it never works. And I think the non-farm payroll number, we always talk on this Friday, and it's important. But the fact is the bigger issue is this election. And I think voters really have to make a decision about, what kind of government do you want to have? And it comes down to jobs. And if the corporate tax rate's going to go from 21% to 28%, and Trump brought it down in 2017 from 35 to 21, and he wants to go to 15.
Right.
It's not really about corporate taxes and how much money the government brings in. I mean, what's the number? The government brought in 2023 $5 trillion, call it, right? And only 10% of that is corporate taxes, $500,000, right? So changing the tax rate from 21% to 28% reduces your revenues by 3%, but it probably costs you, upwards of 1 million jobs, right? So the job market and the housing market react to reality, and the policies that you're getting out of this potential new administration, really it's about something other than pure economics. And of course, when that happens, it doesn't work.
Well, right, and so I mean, just on the capital the structural tax issue. So just setting aside the absurdity of the unrealized capital gains tax, just setting that aside for the moment. I mean, even if you get a rate cut or a couple of rate cuts, well, what happens on the other side if Kamala is elected and she increases the capital gains tax by 50%, which is what she's proposed?
Right. I'm preparing a presentation package for a trip I have to take over to Europe here in the next week or so. And the key issues are jobs, prices, and the effect of new policies on markets. And it cannot be underestimated that the potential new Harris administration will be bad for markets. If you just look at the S&P 500, which is up 15% this year, and sort of 30% from the October lows, it was making an all-time high in July during the Republican National Convention and then the run-up to it. And then the Democratic convention happened, and the market traded down into August, and it kind of bounced back up because of the sort of kumbaya feeling about the whole New Deal. But the fact is, markets have changed their sentiment, and the election is so close, and I'm not a political guy, especially when I'm talking economics, but, the market is under pressure right now, and the Fed knows it because the new administration and all of these capital gain taxes and unrealized gain taxes, it's gonna kill portfolios. It's a redistribution of wealth theme.
The possibility of an October surprise economically. The Wall Street Journal opined on this too, just sort of giving categories. A financial panic in America. It's talking about you still have the concern about stability in the banking industry, potentially a recession in China, political paralysis in Europe. Do you see any of those things as a potential shock to the system between now and the election?
You can always, well, let me put it this way, never say never, right? I mean, something can happen that's out of the blue that can affect things dramatically.
Sure.
So you can't say it's not going to happen. But, if we have the status quo between now and the election, the issue is really how low is the stock market going to go before the Fed stimulates? And that's the 18th. So between now and then, if the market, the rate cuts are priced in, right? They've been priced in for 6 months. So everybody knows it's coming. They've been priced in for 12 months. I think if the economy slows a little bit in September or October, the government will come to the rescue, and the stock market will be near its highs at the election. If Trump wins, they'll go higher. If Harris wins, they'll go lower. And the fact is that the financial system is very liquid, right? I think there's plenty of liquidity in the financial system. I'm kind of curious, and this is kind of an outlier, but if we have a labor shortage and a housing shortage, and home prices are at all-time highs, and stocks are at all-time highs, and the labor force has never been larger, right? It's never been larger, and household incomes have never been higher. So I'm trying to figure out where the crisis is. What's the reason that we have to cut now, other than let's make sure everything's okay through November? Well, now, maybe the Fed sees something I don't see. Maybe the labor market's lower, but I think there's a labor shortage too, and hourly earnings are going up. So I don't think there's going to be a big problem because I think the government comes to the rescue before the election.
But I mean, thinking about it just more expansively, is there anything that any gathering clouds on the horizon that are concerning to you? I mean, yeah, real wages are going up, but they're really still not keeping pace. Personal savings is way down as compared to 4 years ago. Credit card delinquency is up by 50% as compared to 4 years ago. So, I mean, there are things that, and this is why, 2/3 of the country thinks that the economy is on the wrong track, because it is right for them. So there's still something, there's some churn there, and I don't pretend to know where the exogenous shock will come from either, but is there anything that you see that people aren't talking about, sort of these traditional categories of what might happen that we should be concerned about, even beyond November 5th?
Yes, I do think there are some. I mean, obviously China and Russia and Iran, these are exogenous issues that are uncontrollable, really. You don't know where these guys are going to go. But if we think about the economic story, I think that we've really had a bifurcated economy, right, for sort of 3 years. The interest rates are still actually pretty low. 5.5% is, over the 30-year period, they're below average. So corporate America has plenty of capital, right? And the government has got plenty of capital. I mean, they're issuing bills left, right, and center here, and they're not paying interest on it. So I think that the biggest problem is, and then maybe the Fed sees this, and maybe they're 100% right, But small businesses are closing, and households are under significant pressure because, as you said, these real wages are not keeping up with price increases. And Dan, to be honest with you, I think the number one issue in the country, that 2/3 of households and small businesses, what's their biggest concern? It's inflation, right? So what bothers me is that the Fed was promising us, 18 months ago, the number one objective is to get inflation down to 2%. Well, it's twice that, really. And the fact is they're giving up on the inflation fight and throwing more liquidity into the system. And I think that that's going to hurt households. It's going to hurt small businesses. And I think that the financial sector, Wall Street, and the government, they're going to be thrilled with lower rates, right? So you've got this sort of like two-sided picture that the Fed seems to be flipping from trying to help households and small businesses and all of a sudden saying, well, gee, the government's got this big interest expense and Wall Street's not lending, and if we cut rates, the economy will grow. Well, not really. I mean, the biggest problem with small businesses, when you ask them, it's not about the cost of money. It's the cost of regulations, right? That's the thing that's hurting everybody. So at the household level, it's about people. You talk to the average sort of suburban household, and you say the first thing they say is everything's too expensive. Everything's too expensive.
Yeah,
Utilities, services, insurance, school. It's the services. So I'm kind of mad, actually, that the Fed has pivoted and everybody seems to think it's a great idea, and half the country, or 2/3 of the country, thinks it's a lousy idea. So,
well, yeah, let 2/3 of the country eat cake. That's the attitude of the political ruling class. That hasn't changed
you're
much.
right.
Yeah. Jim Perry, founder, CIO, Perry International Capital Partners. James, thanks as always.
Dan, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Have a good week. And
Yes, thank you. And I love listening to your conversation. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's what Chicago is talking about. It's Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy on AM 560. The Answer.
Welcome to Face the Music, sponsored by Fox Valley Coins in Naperville. Today's guest, President Ronald Reagan. Sir, would you mind sharing some golden lines from your past debates and presidency?
Before I refuse to take your questions, I have an opening statement. I have left orders to be awakened at any time.